Potholes. Fuck. Potholes. You're good, Tesla. Good.
As well. Otherwise, they'll be reacting to an empty spot where you're no longer, even if you collected the situation with your sensors, as you start deviating from it in the simulator, you still need the agents to do reasonable things, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess that really kind of gets to my question a little bit, which is, I assume over the last 5 years, as we haven't chatted, there's been a lot of progress in certain areas and maybe certain challenges that are kind of holdouts that remain very, very challenging and maybe not as much progress is made. So in this kind of autonomous driving research world, can you paint in broad strokes kind of where there has been very rapid progress as things have advanced, and maybe some of those of the hardest problems to solve that still remain kind of at arm's length, if you will?
I mean, I would say one thing for folks that especially closer to robotics, they will see, just like the field of AI is going through some crazy inflection point of, both methods people develop and popularity. I think the same is true in robotics and the same is true in AV. I've been in the space over 10 years now, just doing AVs. And I would say every couple of years, our capabilities with AI and machine learning dramatically expand due to innovations. And this innovation train has not stopped. So where we are 5 years later compared to 5 years before in terms of modeling, I think is still a huge improvements possible. I think we're moving more and more to machine learn power stacks, and I think ultimately understanding how to leverage, data-driven, right, elegantly, scalably handle this problem with data-driven solutions. And so that's been generally an evolution. And I think we understand how models behave better. I think these latest architectures and the scaling that we mentioned is a really interesting domain. We started studying it, for example, for a while back. So there's this paper we have, for example, of scaling laws of motion LM architecture. So it's an LLM-like architecture. So you say, oh, well, what are its scaling laws? How does it compare to LLMs? We have a tech report on this, for example. Still similar kind of learnings transfer as LLMs, but there's some bespoke, really interesting things. For example, for that architecture, improving what's called open loop prediction performance seems to correlate to improving closed loop performance. That's not always true, right? And we see different scaling factors compared to language. Like our motion space is nowhere near as diverse as language tokens. Right, so we need actually, for the same set of parameters model, we need a lot more data of examples of how the world behaves to scale. These are interesting findings generally, right? But so that's one. I think now as the architectures keep evolving, now there's diffusion and autoregressive models, and now how do each compare and how do they compare in open loop and closed loop? These are all very interesting areas people are studying. I think generally there's this question lately as well of how do you build the best simulator with machine learning and what kind of models are there. And most recently there's some groundbreaking work like the Genie model by Google. I don't know if you guys saw it. It's a controllable video. Essentially you can give motion controls and it dreams the video close to real time of what it should look like. So essentially you're controlling the world you're imagining a bit, right? And you can do this in real time, or you can do it, of course, off board too, or offline with even larger potentially models. And so now these models are pre-trained on a large amount of video and text. And so they capture a lot of knowledge of how the real world behaves, and it somewhat complements the knowledge that vision language models capture from the internet corpuses. And so how do these two relate? How do you mix them, right? Which one is beneficial for which type of tasks? These are all interesting capabilities that people are doing. And maybe one other interesting topic is there's a lot of talk about architectures for robots that is some combination of System 2 and System 1 architecture. So you guys may have heard it, right? Now we know that large models are more capable when trained on more data and more compute, but in latency sensitive situations, you can't, if they're too big, you can't run them in real time. So now the question is, okay, well, what if you have a real-time model that handles most cases, but then you have a slower model that does better high-level reasoning, that runs at some slower hertz, that helps guide and understand additionally and provide this to the fast model well needed, while still keeping this reflexive capability. Someone jumps in front of you, you still respond, right? These are interesting questions in our domain as well. So there's many, actually. It's a really, really fascinating time, and I think we're studying a lot of these questions, just as the whole field is, and we have some very interesting findings, some of them not published yet. Generally, I would encourage people, come join us. You can, contribute to the premier embodiment of physical AI currently out there, and you can do interesting research, right?
Sounds like fun.
But yes, these are all fascinating topics. And of course, how to control hallucinations in all these models. How do you determine when these models are out of domain and potentially making clear mistakes, right? This can happen. We have research experience with VLMs like many of the current ones, but we have a paper called Emma, where we tried to fine-tune VLM for driving tasks, got a bunch of learnings. It can be quite good, but it has limitations too, right? So how do you overcome these limitations with additional system design is very interesting.
I'm curious, as we're talking about this, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. And I work for another company in autonomy, but in a slightly different context. And I'm curious, one of the things that is popular in the industry I'm in right now is solving for swarming behaviors. As you're talking about many autonomous vehicles that are having to collaborate in certain ways. I'm curious from your take, that may or may not be an interesting problem for Waymo. I don't know what your thinking is on that, but I would love to know, when you look at that space, what are some of the things that you think about and are interesting to you about the notion of many autonomous vehicles collaborating together?
That's been a very interesting area that actually there was early research that I was impressed with, where people proved that if you can control groups of vehicles, you can improve traffic flow. So to me, we are not exactly swarming yet, autonomous vehicles. They're still a subset, a relatively small subset of the whole traffic. So it's mostly, when I think of swarming, I imagine, say, a crowd of 200 people on Halloween all around the car and stuff like this. That's swarming. Or